The need question?
the specific questions with regard to,
On page 17?
yes.
I mean, I think that the question of need for housing is difficult to answer because I don't think there's really great data on that. I've seen the way Los Angeles County tracks it.
Which is family, CalWorks.
Which is
what's
what's
have a
going
mailing
up.
address. Right.
Although I believe some of that includes the unstable housing. But I guess what I would say is it's very clear that high housing costs in California are a huge driver of higher poverty rates in this state compared to other states, and housing is a huge problem. The HSP program is not an entitlement, and counties indeed did ask for more money than we were able to ultimately award to them because we were capped by the appropriation. So we do our best to meet the need. I think the need is greater than the current funding.
And can you move on to question 3 in terms of explaining the difference between the two programs?
The Housing Assistance Program is an older program. It goes back to, I want to say back to the 80s. In the early 90s, and again, it's an assistance payment. It's available for 16 days at $65 per day. There's also some ability to use the program to pay for arrearages and prevent evictions. Typically, we spend about $30 million a year on that program. In the mid-90s, it was made what they call once-in-a-lifetime homeless assistance, so you can only get it once. So again, it's not necessarily a very good measure either, and it does have more restrictive eligibility requirements than housing support. But it's an assistance payment, and if you haven't received it that one time in your life, it is an entitlement, so we budget it that way. And I believe it does have a narrower asset test is actually more restrictive.
It's more restrictive in the homeless assistance.
Yeah, more so than the housing support program.
And if I could just add, Senator, whereas the homeless assistance program really is just simply a payment structure, the housing support program has, at its core, it's a case management function that the county is doing, that in addition to paying sort of move-in costs, sharing in rental costs and things like that, there's real active work in terms of finding housing, brokering the relationship with landlords, maintaining a stable setting and helping with problem solving. So it really is a much more intensive, engaged sort of service.
No question.
Apologize.
Most appropriate for this population.
Yeah, I kind of glossed over rapid rehousing. It has exactly the kinds of features that Director Lightbourne was speaking of.
Okay. Any questions? LAO? Finance? Any public comment on the housing support program?
Madam Chair, Mike Carroll with the Western Center on Law and Poverty. There's a lot going on, obviously, with housing and with CalWorks clients right now. Homelessness is literally an epidemic among our families and within this population. The development of the housing support program is an absolutely appropriate and crucial response to what we're seeing out in the streets. And we applaud the counties and the department for the work that they've done to get this up and moving so quickly. And we support an augmentation to the program. Having said that, we also think that the legislature is appropriate at this point to also think about how we make these programs work better and work better together. For example, the homeless assistance program has a once-in-a-lifetime limit. So someone who is having a second episode of homelessness and who maybe will get the case management services that Director Lightbourne talked about and the ultimate benefits cannot get the same-day housing help that they need to avoid an immediate case of homelessness if they previously used the program. We would urge the legislature to lift this arcane, outdated rule that really prevents the effectiveness of the housing support program at the end of the day. We also think we should align the asset rules between the housing support program and the homeless assistance program, because the asset rules on the front end on that bar people who we would ultimately have in the housing support program. In our letter to the committee, we also noted around the housing support program, the model that we think works so well is one in which counties actually go out and find the housing, provide the recipients a list of potential units which will work for their income level so that they don't have to go out and try and search. The counties where we have seen clients having to go search for their own housing have been less effective than the counties like Santa Clara, for example, where they have actually had a list of housing available. We think a more standardized approach like that would be of benefit to the state and to the clients. And then lastly, we would just note that the cap that is currently in place where you can't spend more than 80% of your income towards the rental on the new unit has the effect of essentially barring people who have extremely low grant levels and no income from work from really being able to get into the housing support program. So we think there, again, needs to be some collaboration between Family Stabilization Program and the Housing Support Program, because the Family Stabilization Program has the flexibility to perhaps come in with some housing dollars in addition to that situation. So these are among our recommendations that we would put forth for the committee to consider as they go through the budget process.
Thank you. Is there another witness?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Vivian Thorpe. I'm an advocate with the Homeless Action Center, former CalWorks client of 11 years, and I also was in the program, the 16-day voucher program. And I just want to say, as somebody who had the personal experience of using that program and seeing some of my clients now who I serve in Alameda County, who I try to help through the process on CalWorks, there's got to be something more permanent. I was in the 16-day program when I was homeless, pregnant with my daughter in Oakland. And at the time, the vouchers were $45, not $65. And 16 days, what you had to do was, which being homeless, I didn't have a computer, and this was in the early 2000s. I had to go to the library and just go on Google and print out and make it look like I was looking for housing for every day, 5 different places. Had no money. No down payment, no deposit. This is real. And I was in the worst hotel in the worst area. I heard somebody getting raped upstairs as me and my kids slept downstairs. And that's real. And after the 16 days, I had nowhere to go. It was over with. It was a one-time thing. That's real. That's what we're really dealing with out there. And that time, my CalWorks was like $525 a month. So with that kind of income, there was no how I would ever have the ability to put down a deposit and even get affordable housing. And with the way affordable housing is going now, getting privatized by a lot of nonprofits and stuff, they're making the criteria merely impossible for anybody on CalWorks to qualify for housing programs nowadays. And so that's another huge barrier that's just recently kind of happened in the last 5 years with the onset of gentrification and technology coming into the Bay Area and making it impossible for people to even rent a room, let alone get housing for their children and their families. So the 16-day program, you know, what I see with my clients, it's pretty ineffective. People use it 16 days, they get in a funky hotel, and then they're back out on the streets again. So if something more permanent and more solid for families would be put in place where there would be 30% of your income housing on a more permanent basis, that's what we really need. We really don't need these Band-Aid programs. We really need something that's more permanent so that we do well, so our children do well. They are our future leaders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm clear that that really is a distinction, the difference between the two programs, 16-day versus a true housing support program. So the next member of the public, don't hold on to the mic so hard. I think her passion just sent that energy through the mic. State doesn't have a bunch of money. We can't replace mics after every hearing. So can you hear me now? Okay, great. So don't hold on to the mic so tight. Just the mic will stand there. You just speak into it. Okay, thank you very much. We'll appreciate that. We're going to move on to issue item number 4. We're continuing in our oversight, and that is focusing on the implementation of AB 74, and that's the early engagement strategies. We're on page 18 of the agenda. I found my reference. I'll share it with you in terms of the CalLearn caseload and the projected utilization. It's on your documents. It's on your key assumptions data, that you're projecting only about 14% will utilize transportation services. And given who they are and the fact that they're pregnant or parenting, that just struck me as really very low. So let's have a sidebar on that. Because I'd just like to know how you came up with that number. I don't know if we're doing enough outreach, if we're communicating the transportation as a part of the program. That's the
Yeah.
red flag for me.
Outreach would be the way our budget people would build something is they'd be looking at actual trends, but it makes you wonder.
It does make you wonder, because since these are high school kids, transportation would be critical. Okay.
With respect to the AB 74 changes and the investments in early engagement, I think your first set of questions is on page 19, with first a focus on enhanced subsidized employment. On page 9 of the handout, I do have some highlights from that. Let me talk for a moment about it. Subsidized employment is a welfare-to-work activity in which counties partner with employers and nonprofits and local public agencies to match low-income parents with jobs. Wages are typically partially or fully subsidized. Employers provide supervision and training. The jobs are in many industries, often entry-level, with the expectation of building work experience to help land an unsubsidized job ultimately, either with that placement or potentially not with that placement, either way. There's actually 2 programs in California for subsidized employment, sort of the older program, sometimes called the AB 98 program, which counties essentially have a share of cost in that program and pay for that in part out of their single allocation. But under the enhanced subsidized ESE program, Enhanced Subsidized Employment, counties have no share of cost. That the program is fully subsidized with TANF and maintenance of effort dollars. As the highlights show in the handout on page 9, typically about 4,500 cases are in subsidized employment in any given month, and throughout the year, more like 8,000 are served. 50 counties are operating a subsidized employment program now. Those are some overview thoughts. I can turn to the question about sort of placements or.
Please do.
I can't exactly answer a question about living wage, but I can say a few things about what the ESC placements are and what happens after those placements. Typically, the placements are paid in the range of $9 to $13 per hour. And in 2013-14, 714 recipients found unsubsidized employment after it ended, after their subsidized employment ended. And that grew to over 1,000 recipients, again, that had gone through in 14-15. And I'm told that in 15-16, we expect that number to be even higher.
So that's about 1,000 of your.
About 4,500 a month are in, 8,200 a year being
Annually.
served, right, are graduating into some sort of permanent unsubsidized position.
So of that 8,000, 1,000 found permanent jobs
Right.
that weren't subsidized.
That weren't subsidized,
Okay.
that is correct. Again, I can't really speak to living wage, but I can talk a little bit about quarterly earnings before and after. These are averages from data that we looked at. Prior to subsidized employment, the average quarterly earnings was $1,114 for our participants, just over $1,100 a month. For the group that followed through and that we were able to study and look at through the EDD wages, that the average quarterly wage was $3,240. Again, that's the group that we can track and see in the EDD. It wouldn't. I believe that number would not include the zeros, the people who didn't find jobs at that point. I don't want to overstate it, but again, so I would say those are positive trends. We think subsidized employment is a great program in that it does 2 things. It immediately gives the client income, and through the disregard system, back to my favorite chart, it moves them off of that zero bar. And then second, it also gives them that work experience and that ability to build beyond that.
Do you capture the data, or do you have a sense of the reasons why people aren't hired or to continue on after the subsidy runs out from the employer?
I don't know as much about, I don't really have that kind of information, but we can look into that. Because what's mixed in that 1,000 that I represented is both types of things. That could be they were in a subsidized employment and that employer retained them post, or it could be, no, they're not in that post. So I don't have those numbers, but we'll see if we can try to break something down for you.
I'm just curious what happened to the other 7,000. Okay, LAO, Finance, have any comment? Senator Monty? Public comment?
I violated.
It's your electricity, so you touched it. Okay, Mr. Mecca, you're a powerful man. Don't touch the mic.
Low learner. With respect to subsidized employment, if I could just sort of refer you to the chart on page 19 of your agenda that your staff put together. It relates to a request that we've made for trailer bill language that the committee and the administration is in receipt of, to basically consolidate what is essentially two different separate subsidized employment programs. There's the AB 98 program that was pre-24-month time limit, and then there's the enhanced subsidized employment program that was enacted as part of the legislative reforms that were negotiated around the 24-month time limit. And there's a tremendous amount of complexity involved in basically maintaining two different programs, two sets of books, two different sets of contracts with the same employers because the rules are different. And so just the administrative burden alone is proving difficult to expand subsidized employment. There's also the post-24-month time limit program, the more fully evolved and highly enlightened program. For employers, it's a more beneficial and attractive program to participate in. The first thing is that the AB 98 subsidy to the employer is capped, and it's a function of CalWORKs grants. So as the minimum wage goes up or wages go up, but CalWORKs grants don't go up, the amount of the subsidy to the employer effectively goes down, and that cap isn't present in enhanced subsidized employment. In the enhanced subsidized employment, the legislature allows us also to cover some other employee-related expenses, such as unemployment insurance and workers' compensation, with some exceptions. And so you can see the blue line is the enhanced subsidized employment program, and it is the one that we're working really hard to expand. We've asked the legislature and the administration to consider putting the programs together while maintaining the county maintenance of effort that's required under AB 98. So we're not trying to get out from under the maintenance of effort that the counties have agreed to as part of the overall scheme. But if we could put the two programs together, simplify the accounting and tracking, and also expand the attractiveness to employers, we think we can really expand the amount of clients who get the benefit of subsidizing.
And since the 24-month clock is, the law of the land, why does the former program even continue?
I think the original design was both programs are available regardless of what clock or where a client is. I think when we created the subsidized employment program, the ESC on top of that, there was, as Mr. Mecca just alluded to, I think the legislature wanted us to get to that 8,000 jobs and wanted to sort of maintain the current effort and put it on top of it.
Got it.
I think what Mr. Mecca is saying makes a lot of sense. At this point, I think while we want to maintain the maintenance of effort, in terms of consolidating and simplification, I think there's a lot of merit to that discussion.
Excellent. Any other public comment? Seeing none, thank you. We will proceed on to issue 5. We're moving to trailer bill language. Oh, I'm sorry.
OCAT,
Did I skip it?
I've got questions on page 20 for OCAT.
There,
But I'll
and
go
I'm
wherever.
sorry. Yeah, so let's focus on the questions on page 20, dealing with OCAT.
OCAT, again, is another one of the changes we made in AB 74. And again, the thinking there was we were creating these flexible opportunities in the 24-month clock. We really wanted to help clients identify barriers and wanted to do that in a consistent statewide way. We had a demonstration before we came and proposed to the legislature of what's called the Online Work Readiness Assessment Program. That was federal software that was made available to states. We had that. We had it in one of our oversight work groups, and then brought forward later that year a proposal to essentially create that and customize that for California, and that is what we have done. It's an interactive appraisal. I confess I have not actually sat in on an interview. The interviews can take a while, and that is a concern that it can take over 2 hours. but it is thorough, and I've seen the way the questions are designed. It's interactive. It's done, although it's at a computer, it is done with a caseworker, and you're filling it out together. When one set of questions perhaps gets a yes about certain types of barriers, more questions are asked along those lines. In the handout on page 10, you can see that essentially we were fully rolled out and had our training. As of August, it was available in all the counties. And then through now February of 2016, we're now doing about 6,500 of these OCAT appraisals are done each month. Essentially, it is now fully implemented. I believe I have 1 or 2 counties just facing a little bit of technical difficulty. We're working with technical systems, and they're very small counties.
Okay.
We consider
They're the last couple of counties that have to come up.
and I think one was even up, but had a problem. And another county is so small that they don't necessarily have someone coming through the door each month.
Got it.
So they're not doing. We consider it fully rolled out, but let me talk a little bit more about it. OCAT, again, it's an appraisal tool, and what it creates is a series of recommendations. It doesn't create specific referrals. It's also very sensitive. It asks about a client's past history, histories around very personal issues, and clients reveal those, and hopefully confidence is built. But essentially, there's been some concerns raised around, well, what about mental health, and how come there are so many, again, on the handout I've got for you, 26,000 recommendations for mental health. That's a recommendation that's part of the appraisal. Then there's a discussion about what does the client want to do with the caseworker. They might choose to do mental health, they might not. So the numbers in terms.
So help me again distinguish the difference between a recommendation and a referral. So what does the recommendation mean? It means an issue was identified, or does it mean the caseworker is recommending in the traditional sense of the term to recommend services be rendered because of these issues identified?
It means that the online tool is printing out a report with a set of recommendations to discuss with the client, between the client and the caseworker.
Okay.
And mental health often comes up as an issue, again, because by design, the system is sensitive. That might have been a mental health issue from years back. It might be something the client doesn't want to address today. So again, we don't see an underutilization of the services at this time, but it's something we're going to be tracking. We can look into OCAT and see what these recommendations look like at a level. We can sort of peer into the data at a statewide level. What we can't see is then what the actual welfare to work plan has in it and how those plans are evolving. And at our oversight,
Action was heated and action was taken. We can't do that.
we don't know what. So the way we're following up on that is, and actually we had a very preliminary presentation in February at our work group where the counties came in. That's the official CalWorks oversight work group pursuant to supplemental report language. At that meeting, different counties walked us through. They each had taken a sample of 20 and talked about what had happened to those clients. So on an individual level, we are following up with the counties. But right now, what I can share with you is the information here on the total number of recommendations. But that doesn't mean that a referral occurs later when the client sits down, works on the welfare to work action plan, and based on that plan, then there would be an official referral to mental health, substance abuse, or whatever is needed. Again, program is fully operational now. And again, we'll be working with our counties to see what's actually happening in terms of, what kind of plans are we seeing, what kind of successes and challenges are we seeing?
The 32,000, again, on your handout, page 10, almost 33,000 that indicated they were not working at the time of the appraisal. Given welfare reform and the current structure of the program, what does that mean?
Now that I look at it, I'm surprised we put that as a bullet. That doesn't surprise me at all, that most, the appraisal's occurring at the front end.
Okay, so they're not working yet.
They're not working yet.
Got it.
Okay,
all right.
What's more interesting, I guess, is the reciprocal, the 44,000 that we've conducted, that means there were 13,000 that were working.
Got it.
Even at the front end.
They just may be.
That one's more surprising to me, actually.
Right. Right, since they're just beginning the process. So, okay, I'm still struggling with this recommendation. It's not really a referral. We don't really know what's going to happen next, but, okay, well, I'll move on from that. And I guess what's concerning from a legal and from a safety perspective is your 17,000 who communicate some experience with DV, human trafficking, or sexual exploitation. Are those handled any differently than the recommendations associated with mental illness?
They're essentially the same. And again, the tool is set to be sensitive. We'd prefer to build that trust with the client, to have them talk about those issues with the caseworker, so that if we want to, if addressing those issues is something the client wants, we'll do that. But again, a client might not choose that.
Okay. Okay.
I think we've touched on, I think, most of your questions here. We are working with the two counties that aren't quite there.
Did he answer number 2? How many families referred?
I think that's the next section.
Did you, Mr. Bland, touch on number 2 for me on page 20? Specifically, how many families are referred to the Family Stabilization Program as a result?
Yes, I asked my staff if we could query the system for family stabilization, and evidently that's not, it does make recommendations for those, but from the statewide data view that we have, I was told I could not get that for you. We don't have that now. We will, I'm hopeful that through the change, this is now an automation system, through the change control system, we will get that capability.
Okay.
And so we can report that. It's possible an individual county could tell you those numbers.
Okay, and let's have an offline conversation about the mental health, the DV recommendations, and just what your vision is in terms of the future role and relevance of OCAT in terms of how that connection to direct service is going to happen. Let's have a conversation about that offline, if we can.
And if
Director?
I just suggest, in terms of recommendation versus referral, I would almost use the word prompt. It's a prompt that there's an issue that should be explored if the client is comfortable going there, feels ready to address something. It may have picked the assessment tool may, as Mr. Bland said, have picked up a historical event.
And I guess the reason I keep coming back to it is given what we need OCAT to be in terms of the 24-month clock, in terms of making sure that people are engaging early. If we are simply acknowledging, or it's a recommendation, I'm not sure how my colleagues and I are supposed to interpret that data. Are we supposed to interpret that data as, how is it relevant to what the OCAT is designed to do in terms of making sure that people are assessed and directed and supported in early engagement to make the most use of their 24 months? You see what I'm saying? So I appreciate that it's capturing data in a moment of time, but I'm like, okay, now how is this relevant and how is it going to be useful from our perspective?
I mean, I think from our perspective, the advantage is it, as opposed to pre-OCAT, information only being known if the client volunteered something, which quite candidly is probably a setting in which that's lower likelihood.
Right.
The goal here is that with it being prompted, the likelihood that it will be dealt with now or at some later point is
And addressed at all, if I get it. Are you standing up to add some comment? Please, public comment.